way, right? Because painting and art can be very physical, as like Aaron was saying, you know, moving the breath and the body, and if you're ever feeling stuck, I want you to think about, where's my breath? You know, how am I breathing? Am I holding in? Right? So just bring that mindful body awareness so that you can really tune in to yourself and your own process and what's really true for you in the moment. Before we go into the process and talk a little bit more about that, I want to introduce myself and share a little bit about my background, how I found this process, and what inspires me. You know, this is my passion, so to be able to share it with you all, it's just, it's like a kid in a candy store. I get so excited. So I want to share with you a little bit how I came to this and how I've created it, and a little bit about the fire tree method and approach and philosophy. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask. My process of creativity was when I was a child. My parents used to call me a highly imaginative child, and it was kind of this, you know, I got that it was this kind of pejorative, you know, like a little bit, you know, they didn't quite know what to do with my creativity and imagination. And so I learned at a very early age to repress it, that it was something that really wasn't valued or acknowledged. And I think that's sort of indicative to our culture, right? We live in a super left brain, production focused, busy, do kind of culture in modern day society. And so the rational mind is dominant, and we learn, again, at a very young age, to kind of suppress that aspect of ourselves, for the most part. So it wasn't until my senior year in high school that I had a painting teacher who really inspired me. And I went off to college, and I was like, in fact, Kate and I went to college together. I went off to Tulane, and I was like, I'm going to be a painting major. And my father was like, no, you are not. You know, he was like, you need to do something practical. Again, that left brain, dominant, rational. He was a businessman, you know. And in all due respect, he really just wanted to support me as a woman and doing, you know, something practical, you know, that I could make a living. So I graduated, so I ended up becoming an English major, and his rationale was like, well, everyone in business needs to know how to write. Of course, I took English lit, and poetry, and Shakespeare, and, you know, I remember I went to summer school, and I took this great class called Women Poets, and, you know, it was all very, you know, I tried to make it as non-rational as possible. But I got out of school, and I had no idea what I wanted to do. I hadn't done any internships. You know, my internship in New Orleans was like music and partying, you know. That's kind of what I learned in the culture, and art. You know, I was a painting minor. And so I got out of school, and I had no idea what I wanted to do. And my family had actually moved from Houston to Boston, and I ended up getting a job in PR. So I was like, oh, communications, and I can write, you know, and it turned out to be a technology PR firm. And so one of my first clients that I worked with was Open Market, and it was one of the first e-commerce solutions. So I was in this really entrepreneurial, kind of creative startup internet, you know, environment, and ended up working in the .com industry and moving to San Francisco and opening an office for a web firm and doing all these really cool, creative, innovative things. And what I loved was that creative energy, you know, especially at that time. It was the beginning of the .com boom, and we were just making stuff up, you know, as we went along. And it was really inspiring, and to be in that entrepreneurial energy was thrilling for me. So I got to be creative in that way. But then after a while, I kind of got burnt out, and I ended up working for Intel Corporation in marketing. And I was like, okay, how the hell did I get here? I knew my life purpose was not to sell microprocessors, right? I had this great job, and I was traveling the world, I was traveling to Japan, and all these, you know, I was making tons of money, and I was miserable. I was depressed. I felt totally disconnected from myself, living this soulless job. I felt that the corporate environment for me at that time was incredibly stifling. and coming from that super entrepreneurial, right, space. So I started to go back to my creative roots, and I took a writing class, I took a dance class, I took a life drawing class, I took a poetry class. But my real passion was painting, and there was a studio in my neighborhood in San Francisco called the Painting Studio, the Center for Creative Exploration. In fact, I'm getting ready to go to take this workshop and this day retreat on the road, and I'm teaching there in June. So it'll be really cool, because I started painting there about 90, well, it was 99, so like 15 years ago. Wow. Really powerful for me, because in that first class, I had such a powerful experience. Well, actually, let me back up. I think it's important to say, when I called Barbara Kaufman, who was the director of the studio, to enroll in the class, she almost tried to talk me out of it. She was like, you know, this isn't a typical painting class. I'm not going to teach you how to paint. You know, this is all about spontaneity and spontaneous creative expression and play. And I was like, sign me up. This is exactly what I needed. So when I got there, the first class, my paintings were really simple. They were very abstract, and yet the experience that I had inside of myself, the experience of freedom, of joy, and the simple act of playing with color, and putting it on paper, and not having anyone to tell me what to do, and you know, being in the present moment and connecting to my creative source was so freeing for me. I mean, it just gave me unbelievable joy. So I was like looking around the room, you know, and I was like, everyone I know needs this. Everyone I know feels disconnected to themselves in some way, to their creativity, to the knowledge that we all are innately creative. And that's when I had a subtle epiphany that this is my life purpose. And it just came, it was very subtle, like, oh, okay, I really want to create spaces for people to connect to their creativity, their creative source, and to free themselves, to be able to experience this level of joy and creative abundance, you know, that it's this internal, eternal well that we have inside of us if we just cultivate the space and connect to it. So that is my passion, and that is why I'm here today and have been. I started Fire Tree Studios actually in my house, which is next door, in the dining room. I turned my dining room into a studio, and I started teaching classes about almost 7 years ago. It was 7 years ago this summer. And then we moved here, and I do retreats all over the country. It's starting to go international this year. In fact, Erin and I are talking about doing a yoga, surf, and paint retreat in Costa Rica in August. So, yeah, and on the Osa Peninsula, which is going to be wonderful. So, this is my passion, and I did that. I had that experience, and I kept painting religiously when I was living in California, and I ended up going and getting a master's in transpersonal psychology with a focus in creative expression. Did all my clinical training to become a marriage and family therapist and an expressive arts therapist, and then I decided I didn't want to be a therapist. For me, the painting process, you know, as Marcy even spoke to it, it's so powerful in that it kind of meets us exactly where we are and what we need in the present moment. And what I love about the painting process is, yes, it can be therapeutic, but really it is supporting you in your own evolutionary growth, and you are the driver, right? You are, if there is any healing or therapy going on, it's between you and the painting, right? And so I invite you to paint like you're in kindergarten, you know, especially if you haven't painted in a while. Like, just start out really simple and playful, and bring wonder and curiosity and play to your process. Any questions about that? Great. So I'm going to take you through the materials. Actually, we'll do a quick centering practice, and then I'll take you through the materials, and then we're going to dive in until lunch, until about 1 o'clock. And then I'll ring a bell, and we'll break for lunch, and you can eat in here or outside. And then you can go back to painting, or we'll start again at 2 o'clock. And then we'll paint from 2 to 4, probably about 2 to 4. We're going to do the sort of closing circle, and then we'll complete at 5. Sound good? All right. So get comfortable. We're just going to spend a few moments. This is called conscious breathing, and I usually start off all of my sessions, individual and group sessions, with conscious breathing. So just close your eyes, come into your body, notice your breath, notice any thoughts or feelings, and notice what it feels like to be in this physical body. Tension, some tightness, or you may have some tingling. Just notice it without judgment. So when you're ready, inhale through the nose for 4 counts. Deep down into the diaphragm. Hold for 4. And then exhale out the mouth for 8. So a little more centered and here. So what I'd like to do is have us all move in around the supplies behind me, around the painting station. So all gather. I love that about this process too. Like, you don't know what's going to happen, you know? There's such a mystery to it, and we can't control it. We just have to surrender and say yes, and follow our intuition, follow our instincts, and stay connected. Absolutely. So, anyone want to share about their process? We can get up and walk around, and those of you that want feedback about your actual paintings, not in a critique way of any kind, but more, we can give feedback in terms of dreaming into your painting about what we see in them. And so there's 2 ways to give conscious feedback. One is, if it were my dream, this is what I see, and the other is how it makes you feel. So it makes me feel alive, or it makes me feel sad or dark, or, you know. So there's 2 ways to give feedback, and it's all a choice. You can choose if you want people to respond to your work in that way, or you can choose not to. So is there anyone that would like to kick us off?
I think that sounds fun.
Yeah, you want to kick us off? Great. Let's go over to Johnny's painting. So I just want to thank you. I want to remind you when you take your paintings home that we've been in a creative vortex in this really safe environment, and you may feel more open and sensitive. Be really gentle with yourself. Remember in the guidelines that in the painting contract that you have with yourself to go back and how to, if stuff comes up. I'm available for you. I actually have a couple spaces in my coaching practice, so if anyone wants to dive in and do some one-on-one work, I have a couple spots available for that. And I have a spring offering, so if anyone wants to talk about doing